Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I'm going to answer a viewer's question in this video. The viewer's question said, what is causing my spool not to go up and down when I turn, the oscillation of it? In other words, it's just laying flat. The rotor is spinning, but the spool is not going up and down. Now in these cases, the spool is going up and down, so that's not his problem. But I did want to take you through the anatomy of the drives that cause that spool to go up and down, and to tell you, if you're out evaluating a reel for purchase and that spool doesn't go up and down, you probably want to walk away from it, because there's no easy fix to that. You might get lucky, but chances are you won't, and you're going to have to buy some replacement parts. And if you're working on an old reel like this one, there's going to be difficult to find the replacement parts for that. So if you understand the dynamic of what makes that spool go up and down, then you can isolate your problem, and in most cases you're going to have to go out and get a replacement part for that. We talked a little bit about buying a reel, maybe at a tag sale or a flea market or on eBay or whatever. You always want to test a lot of different things. You want to test to make sure that it spins easily. And I've taken the handles off of these because I don't want to bore you in terms of case disassembly. But you want to make sure it spins easily, that the drags work, that the bail works and flips, that the cosmetics on it overall look good, and of course that the spool goes up and down. Those are just some of the basics. You want to make sure that if you have an anti-reverse override, that the anti-reverse override is working, and you want to just make some general observations about the reel before jumping in on a bid. And again, one of the more costly ones is if your spool does not go up and down. The other ones, you know, they generally can be remedied with some oil and grease and cleaning. Of course, if your reel isn't turning, you don't want to buy one either, or at least you don't want to buy it and think that it's going to be easy to get that back together. But let's answer the viewer's question here. There's 4 predominant Crosswind oscillating gear kind of systems that are out there. I thought I would take you from a little shop into each. I've got 3 of them. I'm not going to take you into the Shimano Stratic kind of a one, which is a combination one. But if you pay attention to this, if you have a Stratic, pay attention to this one, and then pay attention to the one that I'm going to post in the near future, which is why a level wind feature on a conventional reel doesn't work. And between the 2 of those, you'll understand how to go do the problem diagnosis and try and figure out what parts are needed if you have that Shimano type of a system. Let's start with the earliest of them. I've picked an old Shakespeare for that. In the Shakespeare's case, as in all of these cases, they use one drive, which is the crank drive, to transfer motion from a up and down gear to something that's going to make the spool go up and down. In the older setups, this one is a setup similar to this for the Penn Spinfisher and some of the other older reels on the market. This one had a screw and a collar on that main gear. You can see I've pulled it off to the side here. There's a screw that belongs here, a little washer, and then this ring would go over that. And then as this gear spun, the arm would move up and down. You're not seeing it here, but the arm would move up and down with that stud. And again, this is an older reel, but the arm would move up and down for that stud, and that stud would push the spool up and down, because you transferred the power from this gear to the spool's shaft, or the axle shaft, and that drives this spool up and down. So that's one of the systems. That's an older system. You don't see that spiral pinion gear too much anymore. On the lower end reels and some of the earlier editions of the Japanese reels, and this is a Shakespeare Alpha, they made a change where they drove everything off of the main gear. So let's just take the side plate off of this and show. So in this case, you had a main gear, you had an offset eccentric, and you could transfer that flat gear to an up and down motion with the offset with a pin and with a crosswind arm, and it works like this. And of course, I'm not holding it tight enough here, that doesn't help. But by moving this on an eccentric cycle, you'll see that the spool is going up and down. So a common failure on this one is that this pin comes loose. So there's two things that are driving this. You have a pin that's holding the crosswind arm in. It goes through a hole in the spool on the bottom, and then it anchors itself into a little channel. And this is the channel which keeps it going straight as this offset or eccentric rotates. So just put that back together for a moment, and then we're going to come back and tell you what causes this. So if you have this type of a setup and your spool's not going up and down, it most likely will be that this pin has come loose from the hole here, or that you've broken the case behind it here, and that that channel is no longer a solid channel. And if you don't have that solid channel, then you have a problem with the alignment and the spool. So what causes these things to come out of alignment? What causes these things to break? Well, the simple answer is that people get hung up on the rocks. More times than not, it's generally not fighting a fish. It's hung up, snagged on something, whether it's the rocks or whether it's a log or something, and they try to crank their way out of it. And if you try to crank your way out of it, there's always going to be the weakest link in a reel that's going to break. And in all of these reels, the weakest link is in that crosswind mechanism that pulls up and down. Very rarely are you going to ruin the main gear, but you will ruin the assorted ones. So let's go over to the most popular ones then. Here's a Penn. This is a Fierce. And this is probably the most common of all of the setups today. I'll apologize for all the grease in that. But when you open up this reel, you don't see the crosswind mechanism right away. You have a main gear. You have your axle shaft, which is below. Let's see if we can bring that in. We got a gear, got a reel that's totally overloaded with grease here. You got a crosswind block, main gear, and now let's take this off and show you the other components of it. And then again, if you have this problem, you probably have a reel like this. The main components of this one is a main gear that drives an oscillating gear that drives the crosswind gear or crosswind block that moves the axle shaft up and down. So I've just removed the two screws, much like the pin in the Alpha. Those two screws hold the shaft in place. And then we have a main gear. We have a crosswind block full of grease. I probably should have put some protection on here. I didn't realize this reel was going to be as bad as it is in terms of grease. I'll wipe down that. So we have the crosswind block, crosswind gear, main gear are the components with an attachment to the axle shaft. So here's your crosswind block. Much like the one on the Alpha, it connects to the axle, only it uses screws as opposed to the pin. Then you have a main gear. And the main gear, this is driving the pinion gear up top, which makes the rotor go around. But it also drives an oscillating gear with the smaller one in the back, which transfers that energy. Again, we have that flat case gear that transfers the energy from this to that flat one. It has the stud on it, like the earlier edition here where it had a stud. That stud, hard to see, that stud rides in a channel on that crosswind block and transfers that to an up and down motion like the eccentric did on that Alpha. So if you have a problem with a reel of this configuration, then you have to check four things to find out why your spool isn't going up and down. So here's the first one. You check all of the teeth on the main gear. That's the small one behind. If there's any chipped or broken ones, as you're turning this gear, you'll come to that flat spot and you'll have an erratic drive. You have to check the teeth on the crosswind gear. This is the most likely culprit if it's not going up and down at all. If it's going up and down erratically and you have a broken tooth back here, you'll have a skip. So it'll drive for a while, it'll hit the missing tooth or two, and it'll kind of stammer, and then it'll pick up because that is going to continue to ride. If you have broken teeth on this one, that's not going anywhere, because once you reach that channel that has the broken teeth, no matter how much you spin this, these teeth will not pick up on a flat-sided broken section here. So most likely you're going to have a broken crosswind gear. You can have a broken crosswind gear on the teeth, but you can also have a broken crosswind gear if the stud is broken off. And that stud broken off will have the same effect as this. This gear will turn, but this arm will not be connected, and as a result the spool won't go up and down. So check the teeth, check the stud. This case is a mess. I'll probably have to go back in and clean this up at some point, but again, from an illustration standpoint. So we have that. Then we have the channel here, and this is the crosswind block. Now this one doesn't break as frequently as the crosswind gear, but it does break. So what you want to check for is, one, did the screws fall out for some reason? Now in this case you got a double screw. Most of the reels that are out on the market have a single screw, so if the screw fell out, then you're going to have the effect of a shaft with everything turning, but the shaft isn't connected, so it's just going to sit there. So you'll have everything turning, but it won't be moving, or the shaft won't be moving up and down. The other thing is, and I've seen this on the pen reels a lot, is that this crosswind block fractures. That it just, it breaks. It breaks in usually right along the seam here. And when it breaks, that stud rides out of the channel, and then it's not driving it any longer. Why does it break? Well, on the pen fierce reels and this generation of reels, they have eliminated the anti-reverse override. So this only goes this way, and you can't back that off. Well, unfortunately, from time to time, something happens where the main gear gets caught up top here. You're at the high stroke here, you got line in it or something, and you can't reel the line back to drop down this piece. It'll only go in one direction, and when it goes in one direction, this gets out of kilter and it breaks off here. So it does happen, and trust me, as I mentioned before, in any of these situations, what you find yourself in for is an expensive repair regardless. Why does it happen? Because folks, for the most part, will try to wrench with the reel. If they're hung up on, again, they could be on rocks, could be on wrecks, could be on anything, stumps, logs, whatever. And when you're turning and you're stuck, something's got to give. It'll either be the teeth on the back of this one that'll give, the teeth here will give, or the shaft will bend and break a crosswind block. So in answer to your question, why does my spool not go up and down, if you understand the mechanics of the reels, whether it's an older reel that has a spiral gear with a stud, whether it's a lower end reel that has this crosswind arm that drives, or whether it's the more common of them where it has a main gear driving an oscillating gear, driving a crosswind block, the weakest point is always going to be the one that breaks, and more times than not in this particular setup, it's going to be this oscillating gear that's going to have the teeth stripped out of it. That one, or the back of the main gear. In all cases, there's no repair for that. The only repair for that is to do a replacement. So I hope that answers your questions. We're going to rebuild all of these. That's why they're in kind of pieces and parts. There'll be future projects that I have. but I did want to answer that. Now, in the case of Shimano, that Stratix that I was telling you about, Shimano uses yet another approach. It uses a main gear with a drive gear behind it, to a drive gear in the case, to a worm gear, very similar to a level wind type of a worm gear type of assembly, only instead of driving the line guide left and right, if you can imagine it this way, it's driving the shaft up and down to create that oscillation. So you're going to have a hybrid in that situation. But that's why your reel isn't working. If it's not going up and down, it's one of those three: the pin on the old arm type, the stud on a very old Spinfisher, or in this case a Wonder, I think that's the Wonder Reel, Shakespeare, and in this case it's probably the oscillating gear that's missing teeth that have caused that issue. So I hope that's helped. This video came by way of a request from a viewer in the comments section. If you have comments, please leave them. I'll try and answer your questions for you. We're going to do a follow-up video. The second video is actually going to be why doesn't my level wind guide, which would be this thing, move, right? It's broken. Why doesn't it move? And we'll give you the componentries that drive that system. The causes are almost identical. Somebody got hung up somewhere and decided to try and crank their way out of it and broke the weakest link. So we'll show you what the links are in that one and how to go correct that if that's the case as well. So if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe. We need subscriptions to keep this this channel alive and vibrant. If you like the video, please indicate that. And if you have comments, whether it's about this reel or if it's questions in general that you have about reels and how they're designed and common problems that you may need to fix, we've done some of these on like how to fix a defective bail, which goes across all kinds of brands of reels. We've tried to do some of those things as well, and some of it is an education, some of it's to help you out immediately, and some of them is just because we're curious and we just want to know, well, why is that doing the things that it's doing. On a regular basis, I think in my comment section I probably get 10, 20 questions a week about certain things that have nothing to do with the videos, so don't feel like it has to be about the particular videos that I'm showing. By all means, if you're stuck on a problem, if you don't know where a spring goes, if you lost the way in terms of assembling or disassembling a reel and you've got some pieces of parts you don't quite know the orientation of, then please, by all means, ask that and I'll try to respond to that. If you have a reel that needs repair and you're not up for doing the repair, then contact me for that as well, as I do provide mail order reel service. And by all means, please, this is a pandemic that we're in right now. That's why we're doing the videos we're doing. Please stay safe, stay healthy, stay out of harm's way. Do what you're asked to do from a responsibility standpoint, in terms of covering up, wearing masks, washing hands, doing all those kinds of things. And yes, we will get fishing again soon, so this will pass. So with that, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Appreciate you watching, spending part of your day with me. Please stay tuned, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. I'm trying to post daily to get us all through this pandemic. So thank you for watching. Have a great day.